Hi, this time we will explain the storyline of a film called Slumdog Millionaire, which was released back in 2008. This film tells about a child who lives in poverty within a slum area in the city of Mumbai, India, who suddenly becomes rich after winning the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire quiz.
B. Franklin Roosevelt.
Alright, then let's get straight to the plot of the story.
Mumbai!
This film begins by showing a teenager named Jamal Malik, who at that time was being interrogated and tortured sadistically because he was suspected of cheating while taking the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire quiz. He was able to answer all these questions even though previous contestants such as a professor, doctor, and even a lawyer were not able to answer all the questions correctly. Especially an uneducated teenager like him.
Been here whole bloody night, Srinivas. What have you been doing?
Because he did not admit his cheating, the inspector immediately ordered his subordinates to give even more sadistic torture. Jamal received an electric shock that made him faint. This panicked the police.
Get him down, tidy him up, please, for God's sake!
One of the big-bodied police said it was possible so far that he was really a genius and didn't cheat in answering it, but this statement made the inspector look angry. Not long after, Jamal was taken to another room, where Jamal said that he really could answer all the questions because he had experienced all the answers in his life. To prove it, the inspector started to play a recording of the quiz show that was held last night. At first he was belittled by the host and several other audience members after learning about Malik's background, who was only an office boy. The host also reminded that these questions were not easy questions to answer.
A chaiwala!
Before the quiz started, the presenter said that he could use 3 aids, which were through the help of the audience, 50-50, and calling a friend. Not long after that they started the quiz. The first question was worth 1,000 rupees, which was, who was the movie star in the film Zanjeer back in 1973? Before answering the question, Jamal remembered when he was a child, where he was locked in the toilet, and at the same time he and his brother named Salim competed to get the signature of the legendary actor Amitabh Bachchan. In order to get his idol's signature he had to find another way, which were through the disposal. In the end his body was filled with dirt. Long story short, his body was covered in dirt made it easy for him to break through many people, so he managed to get his idol's signature.
Hey, Amitabh Bachchan.
He also said that the question was a fairly easy question and there were many people who could answer it. Next was the second question. The question was, what is the sentence under the image of the lion on the coat of arms of India? However, it was quite difficult for Malik to answer this question, so he was confused and immediately asked for help to ask the audience. Seeing this, he said that everyone, even children, knew the answer to that question.
My 5-year-old daughter can answer.
But Malik instead asked the inspector with a question that only he could answer. The inspector was silent and could not answer it. Malik also explained that not everyone always knew what everyone knew. Thanks to the help from the audience, Malik was finally able to get 4,000 rupees. Next, in the third question. In this third question Malik would get a prize of 16,000 rupees. The question was, in the depiction of Lord Rama, what object does he always hold in his right hand? To answer this question, Jamal also recalled a sad story in his life. At that time in his area there was an interreligious conflict that ended in a riot in which his mother was trapped and killed. He and his brother tried to run for safety. On the way they saw a child who looked like the god Rama, who was carrying a bow and arrow. Jamal answered the question and said that the object that Lord Rama carried in his right hand was a bow. The answer was correct and he got 16,000 rupees. The next question was, who is the songwriter of Darshan Du Ghanshyam? He then remembered his past. At that time Jamal, Salim and a little girl named Latika, who became scavengers, met a man named Mamun. Mamun was a bad person who ordered the children to become buskers and beggars. One night in a hidden place, Mamun did a terrible thing to the children. Those who had good voices would be blinded so that people will sympathize with them and give the money. After one of their friends was blinded, it was Jamal's turn. He was called and then asked to sing his favorite song, Darshan Du Ghanshyam. Then, the one who would drug Jamal was none other than Salim. Knowing something bad will happen to his younger brother, he finally threw chemical liquid at Mamun's subordinates and ran away. Not forgetting that, they also immediately untied Latika's hands so that they were free from the pursuit of Mamun's subordinates. The inspector asked the condition of Latika, but it turned out that one night they had left Latika.
Latika! You're right!
Moving on to the next question. The next question was, whose photo is on the $100 bill? Then the scene moved. Long story short, they finally decided to look for Latika again. They returned to the shelter and met an old friend who had been blinded. Jamal promised to give him $100 if his friend would tell him where Latika was. Not sure about Jamal, he finally asked who was behind the $100 bill, and Jamal answered it was Benjamin Franklin. Jamal finally was able to answer the question.
1 million rupees!
Long story short, they finally found Latika, who was now working as a dancer in a bar. To save Latika, they bravely tried to shoot Mamun, took the money and left there.
I can't take that risk.
The next question was, who invented the gun? At that time Jamal could easily answer that question. After the murder, they hid in an abandoned hotel. This is where Jamal found the answer to that question. While they were resting, somehow suddenly Salim came and forced Latika to stay with him and chased Jamal away.
The man with the Colt 45 says shut up.
Since then Jamal gave up Latika, which was then taken by Salim somewhere. Since then, Jamal had been away from his brother's life, and as time went by they were getting older, and at that time Jamal was working as an office boy in one of the leading provider companies in India. When he delivered drinks, Jamal was asked to replace the operator there. He also took this opportunity to look for Latika's number, but unfortunately the results were so large that it was impossible to call all the numbers on the phone. Then he tried to find his brother's name and came up with several numbers that could be contacted. He tried to call the number one by one until he was sure that the one who answered the call was his brother. Salim also realized that it was the voice of Jamal. At that time Salim immediately asked Jamal to live with him because it turned out that they had been wanted by Mamun's men. Moving on to the next question, this question contained, where the Cambridge circus came from. He obtained this answer when he first worked at the provider's office. Because of his long working experience, he also heard a lot of information including the Cambridge circus, which turned out to be not from Cambridge as the name suggested, but from London. Jamal's answer immediately took him to the next stage and earned 5 million rupees.
Absolutely right!
The next scene showed Jamal, who finally met his brother, and vents his frustration. It turned out that all this time Salim had been a member of a big mafia named Javed, who was Mamun's enemy, so for Salim to be safe, he invited him to live with him. One day Jamal followed where Salim went. His goal was to find Latika. And sure enough, all this time Latika was living with Javed.
I'm so late for the mem, sir.
At that time Jamal immediately asked Latika to go, but Latika refused. At that time it was seen that Latika was often tortured by that person. At the same time, Jamal saw the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire quiz on TV. This program was often watched by Latika and became one of her favorite shows. Not long after, Javed also came, but he did not suspect and thought that Jamal was the new maid in his house.
As it is, I am a millionaire.
Moving on to the next scene with a prize of 10 million rupees, who is the highest scoring cricketer in history. At that time Jamal was a little confused. He had heard of this at Javed's house, but he was too focused on Latika. He finally chose the 50-50 lifeline, and 2 of the answer choices were wasted until only choices B and D were left.
2 wrong answers, please.
With a little hesitation, Jamal immediately chose, and it turned out that the answer was correct.
D. Jacobs!
After answering the question, now he was in the last question with a total prize of 20 million rupees. But unfortunately the time for this event had run out and will be continued the next day. When he left the room, suddenly Jamal was immediately taken by several police officers. The organizers apparently suspected that Jamal had cheated. After Jamal explained all his life stories, the inspector finally believed and freed Jamal to complete his quiz. Before the inspector left, Jamal had said that he took the quiz not because of money but because he wanted Latika, who liked this program, to see it. Then came the fateful night where Jamal could change his entire life. A homeless person who ended up in this chair was in the spotlight of all India. Knowing his brother was already on TV, Salim immediately realized his mistake and immediately went to Latika, who was alone watching the program. He apologized and told Latika to go meet Jamal with his cell phone.
For God's sake, hold on.
At that time Jamal was faced with his final question, which was, in Alexander Dumas' book entitled The Three Musketeers, 2 of them are named Athos and Porthos, and what is the name of the third musketeer? Surprisingly, Jamal immediately laughed at this last question, not because he knew the answer but because back at school, Jamal and Salim were thrown a book entitled The Three Musketeers by their teacher for joking too much. Because there was no other help than using the option of calling a friend, he tried to contact Salim.
Here we go.
However, the one who answered the phone was Latika.
Hello?
And unfortunately Latika did not know the answer at all. Because his intention was not because of the money, finally he guessed the answer. He answered choice A for Aramis.
The right answer!
And unexpectedly the answer was correct and he managed to get a prize of 20 million rupees. But unfortunately in another place, his brother had been killed by Javed's men for freeing Latika. The film closes by showing Jamal who finally met Latika at a station.